The thing you pretend isn't there. You've spent your entire life building a personality, curating it, polishing it like a trophy you show to strangers. You've decided who you are, the kind one, the logical one, the one who has their life together. And underneath that personality, something else is breathing. Carl Jung called it the shadow. It's every thought you've banished, every impulse you've crushed, every version of yourself you murdered to become acceptable. And here's what makes it dangerous. It didn't die. It just learned to operate without your permission. Most self-help tells you to focus on your strengths, visualize success, affirm your way to greatness. Jung would have laughed at that. He knew something those Instagram gurus don't. You cannot become whole by worshiping half of yourself. The other half doesn't vanish because you've decided it's ugly. It festers, it waits, and eventually it makes decisions for you. Let's talk about how you got here. Carl Jung was Sigmund Freud's golden boy until he wasn't. They met in 1907 and talked for 13 hours straight. Freud thought he'd found his intellectual heir. Jung thought he'd found a mentor. They were both wrong. Freud believed the unconscious was essentially a trash compactor, repressed sexual memories and forbidden wishes getting crushed into symptoms. Jung thought that was embarrassingly limited. He saw the unconscious as a vast landscape with its own geography, inhabitants, and intelligence. Freud wanted to drain the swamp. Jung wanted to explore it. Their friendship ended badly. Freud accused Jung of mysticism. Jung accused Freud of intellectual cowardice. They exchanged bitter letters and then stopped speaking entirely. Two brilliant men who couldn't handle each other's shadows. Ironic, considering what Jung would spend the rest of his life studying. After the break, Jung entered what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. For nearly 4 years, he deliberately induced visions, recorded dreams, and had conversations with figures that emerged from his own psyche. He painted mandalas, he built stone structures. His colleagues thought he was losing his mind. He thought he was finding it. What emerged from that chaos was his theory of the shadow. The shadow forms in childhood. You arrive on this planet as a complete creature, capable of joy, rage, tenderness, cruelty, desire, and destruction. Then adults start editing you. They don't do it maliciously. They're trying to civilize you, turn you into someone who can function in society. So they reward certain behaviors and punish others. Smile gets approval. Anger gets time out. Compliance gets love. Defiance gets isolation. You're a smart animal. You figure out the game quickly. You learn which parts of yourself earn connection and which parts threaten it. And because connection equals survival when you're small and helpless, you start amputating. The aggressive impulses, hidden. The sexual curiosity, buried. The selfish desires, denied. The weird thoughts, the dark fantasies, the parts that made adults uncomfortable, all of it gets shoved into what Jung called the personal unconscious. This is the shadow taking shape. It's not a monster you were born with, it's a monster you were forced to create. By the time you're an adult, you've forgotten the burial sites. You've identified so completely with your acceptable personality, what Jung called the persona, that you genuinely believe that's all you are, the good employee, the supportive friend, the reasonable person. Meanwhile, the shadow has been lifting weights in the basement for 20 years. Here's why this matters. Repression costs energy, massive amounts of it. Every quality you've exiled requires constant psychological force to keep down. That's energy you could be using to create, to connect, to actually live. Instead, you're running a full-time prison in your own psyche, and the prisoners keep escaping anyway. Jung identified projection as the primary escape route. Projection is when you see your own disowned qualities in other people and react to them as if they're external threats. That colleague who irritates you beyond reason, the one whose arrogance makes your skin crawl, look closer.
There's something in that arrogance that mirrors a quality you've forbidden in yourself. Maybe it's your own buried ambition. Maybe it's your own desire to be seen as superior. Whatever it is, you've projected it outward because owning it feels impossible. This is why Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Not might lead, can lead. The irritation is data. Your emotional charge around other people's behavior is almost never just about them. It's about the parts of yourself you've made into enemies. Atlas Protocol 1, the projection detector. For 2 weeks, track your strongest negative reactions to other people. Not mild annoyance, the intense stuff. The people who make you genuinely angry, disgusted, or contemptuous. Write down the specific quality that triggers you. Not the person's name, the trait. Selfishness, neediness, phoniness, aggression. Then ask the uncomfortable question, where does this quality live in me? Your first response will be denial. That's the persona protecting itself. Push through. Find the grain of truth. You don't have to be as extreme as the person you're judging. You just have to find where you contain the same seed. This exercise will make you hate me. Do it anyway. The shadow doesn't just leak through projection. It erupts through what Jung called the return of the repressed. This is when the pressure becomes too great and the basement door flies open. The controlled person suddenly explodes in rage. The faithful spouse has an affair that makes no logical sense. The disciplined achiever goes on a bender that destroys months of progress. The mild-mannered employee sends an email that ends their career. These eruptions always shock the person experiencing them. That wasn't me. I don't know what came over me. Jung would say, that was absolutely you, the you that you've been refusing to meet. And because you refused the introduction, it introduced itself in the worst way possible. This is the core problem with repression. It doesn't work. You cannot permanently exile parts of your own psyche. You can only choose to integrate them consciously or have them integrate themselves unconsciously, usually through crisis. Now here's where most people misunderstand the shadow. They assume it's purely negative, the dark side, the evil twin. Jung was more nuanced. Yes, the shadow contains your capacity for cruelty, deception, and selfishness, but it also contains gold. He called this the golden shadow. It's the positive qualities you've repressed because they threatened your self-image or your social position. Maybe you were raised in an environment where intelligence was threatening. Smart kids got bullied. Smart kids made their parents feel inadequate. So you learned to hide your brightness. That intelligence went into the shadow. Maybe you were raised to be modest. Ambition was arrogance. Wanting to recognition was vanity. So you buried your drive. That drive went into the shadow. Expressing joy made you vulnerable. Showing enthusiasm got you mocked. So you cultivated coolness and detachment. That capacity for pure, childlike joy went into the shadow. The golden shadow explains why we hero worship. When you encounter someone embodying a quality you've exiled in yourself, confidence, creativity, charisma, power, you don't just admire them, you become fascinated, obsessed. You put them on a pedestal because you're actually looking at a mirror. The energy you spend worshiping others could be spent reclaiming what you've disowned. Atlas Protocol 2, the Golden Shadow Hunt. List 5 people you deeply admire, not people you like, people who captivate you. Celebrities, historical figures, people in your life, anyone whose qualities make you feel something close to awe. For each person, identify the specific quality that draws you. Not vague descriptions, precise traits. Their fearlessness, their creative vision, their ability to command a room. Now sit with this truth. You cannot recognize a quality in others that doesn't exist in seed form within you. Admiration is recognition. Those qualities are yours, exiled. What would it mean to stop outsourcing your own potential? That's paper 1. You've met the shadow. the hidden self that forms through childhood repression, escapes through projection and eruption, and contains both your darkness and your disowned light. In paper 2, we do the archaeology. We go into the basement with a flashlight and find out what's actually down there.
The archaeology of the self. Knowing about the shadow is worthless. Millions of people have read about Jung, nodded thoughtfully, and continued running from themselves for the rest of their lives. Information without integration is just intellectual decoration. Shadow work is not a concept to understand, it's a process to undergo. And that process is uncomfortable enough that most people will find any excuse to avoid it. Let's eliminate your excuses. The goal of shadow work isn't to defeat your dark side. That framing is part of the problem. You've spent your whole life treating parts of yourself as enemies. That's what created the shadow in the first place. More warfare won't help. The goal is integration, bringing the exiled parts back into consciousness, not so they can run wild, so they can be seen, understood, and given appropriate expression. A person who has integrated their aggression isn't violent. They're capable of healthy anger and strong boundaries. A person who has integrated their selfishness isn't greedy. They're capable of self-advocacy and genuine generosity that doesn't breed resentment. Integration creates choice. Repression eliminates it. Jung developed several methods for shadow work. The most powerful and most unsettling is active imagination. Active imagination means engaging with unconscious contents as if they were real. You don't analyze the shadow from a safe intellectual distance. You dialogue with it. You give it a voice and listen to what it says. This sounds like something that could get you institutionalized. Jung nearly institutionalized himself doing it. But the technique works because the unconscious communicates in images and personifications, not abstractions. To meet the shadow, you have to meet it on its own terms. Here's a simplified version that won't require a psychiatric evaluation. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, think of a quality you've strongly rejected in yourself, something that disgusts you when you see it in others. Selfishness, cruelty, weakness, vanity, whatever you've most aggressively disowned. Now let an image form. Don't force it. Let your unconscious produce a figure that represents this quality. It might be a person, an animal, a monster, a version of yourself. Accept whatever appears. Once the image stabilizes, start a conversation. Ask it questions. Who are you? What do you want? Why are you here? What happens when I ignore you? What do you need from me? Write down both the questions and the answers that emerge. Don't censor. The answers will feel like you're making them up. You are in the sense that they're coming from your own psyche, but they're coming from a part of your psyche that usually doesn't get microphone access. The responses are often surprising. That inner figure representing your rage might not want destruction. It might want protection. It might want respect. It might be exhausted from being treated as a threat when all it ever wanted was to keep you safe. Atlas Protocol 3. The basement dialogue. Choose one shadow quality, one you know is down there because of how violently you react when you see it in others. Set a timer for 15 minutes. Close your eyes and let a figure form that represents this quality. Describe its appearance in writing first, every detail you can perceive. Then begin the dialogue. Alternate between your questions and the figure's responses. Don't edit, don't judge, don't try to make it sound smart or profound. Let it be awkward and strange. That's authentic, unconscious material. Do this once a week for a month with the same figure. The conversation will deepen as you build relationship with this disowned aspect of yourself. You'll know integration is happening when your emotional charge around this quality decreases, when you can see it in others without the same intensity, when you can acknowledge its presence in yourself without shame spiraling. Dreams are another royal road to the shadow.
Jung treated dreams as letters from the unconscious, communications that use symbol and narrative, because the unconscious doesn't speak in logic. Shadow figures in dreams often appear as threatening strangers, enemies, criminals, or monsters. Same-sex figures are particularly significant. If you're a man and dream of a menacing male figure, that's likely shadow material. If you're a woman and dream of a threatening female figure, same principle. The dream doesn't mean you're secretly evil. It means there's unintegrated energy trying to get your attention. The unconscious sends messages. If you ignore them, it sends louder messages. If you keep ignoring them, it starts expressing itself through symptoms and behaviors you can't control. Keep a dream journal. Write immediately upon waking before the conscious mind edits the content. Look for recurring figures. Look for patterns. Over time, you'll start recognizing the cast of characters in your unconscious. Some of them are shadow figures. Some of them are what Jung called anima and animus, contrasexual aspects of the psyche. Some are archetypal images from the collective unconscious. All of them have something to teach you. Now let's address resistance, because you will resist this work. The persona, your constructed identity, does not want the shadow integrated. Integration threatens its monopoly. For years, the persona has been telling you who you are, and that story requires the shadow to stay hidden. If you start acknowledging your capacity for selfishness, the persona's story about being selfless collapses. If you start owning your aggression, the story about being peaceful falls apart. The persona will generate sophisticated arguments for why shadow work is unnecessary. You're fine. You've dealt with your issues. This is self-indulgent navel-gazing. You have more important things to do. Recognize this resistance as information. The harder your persona fights against examining something, the more important that something probably is. Resistance marks the spot. You'll also face fear. The shadow has been demonized in your mind for decades. You've built it into a monster. What if you open that door and can't close it again? What if your darkness overwhelms you? What if you discover you're actually a terrible person? Jung had an answer for this. He said the shadow, when met consciously, is almost never as terrifying as the fantasy of the shadow. The monster in your imagination is worse than the monster in the basement, because the monster in the basement is just an abandoned part of yourself, wounded, exiled, but not evil. The truly dangerous people are not those who've met their shadows. They're the ones who haven't. They're the ones whose repressed darkness erupts without warning. They're the ones projecting their own hatred onto enemies and acting out unconsciously. Consciousness is the antidote to possession. Here's what happens when you do this work. You become less reactive. People who used to trigger you lose their power. Not because they've changed, but because you've withdrawn your projections. You see them more clearly because you're no longer using them as screens for your own disowned movie. You gain energy. The life force you were spending on repression becomes available for creation, connection, and growth. Integration is energetically profitable. You become more effective. The qualities in your shadow aren't just liabilities, they're capacities. Your aggression, consciously integrated, becomes assertiveness and the ability to protect what matters. Your selfishness, consciously integrated, becomes healthy self-interest and the ability to say no. Your darkness, consciously integrated, gives you depth and the ability to understand others who are struggling. You develop what Jung called moral courage. This is different from naive goodness. Naive goodness is untested. It's the goodness of someone who's never met their capacity for evil. Moral courage is the goodness of someone who knows exactly what they're capable of and chooses differently. A person who has never faced their shadow isn't good. They're just inexperienced, and inexperience is dangerous because it breaks under pressure. Jung put it this way: I'd rather be whole than good. This isn't a rejection of morality, it's a deeper morality. It's the recognition that genuine ethics require self-knowledge. You can't truly choose the light until you've acknowledged the dark.
Otherwise, you're not choosing, you're just avoiding. The shadow is not your enemy, it's your depth. It's the part of you that knows what it's like to be fully human, not the sanitized, acceptable, curated human, but the whole creature, the one who contains multitudes, the one capable of great love and great destruction. Integration doesn't make the darkness disappear, it makes the darkness conscious, and consciousness transforms. What you're aware of, you can work with. What you're unaware of controls you. So do the work. Track your projections, engage in the dialogue, record your dreams, face the figures you've been running from. The shadow has been waiting, patiently, persistently, in the basement of your psyche, knowing that eventually you'd get tired of your own patterns to finally look. That moment is now. Open the door. The thing you've been most afraid of meeting is just the part of you that's been waiting to come home.